at the end of our life, if we're lucky enough to live to be 100 years old, we're not going to look back and smile at how much we have in our bank account or what's on our resume. It's who we've become as human beings, the depth we've been able to create inside of us to discover our values, to discover what we're really here for, on this earth, and how we're here to contribute to others.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network, connections, old connections, new connections. These guests are great leads to those books that have impacted their life, their work, their leadership, all of it, all those worlds intersect. And my guest today is Marc Inzelstein. And Marc is an executive advisor and leadership coach to senior leaders of global organizations. With more than 25 years of experience, he works closely with executive teams to navigate complexity, align around what matters most, and translate strategy into meaningful action. His work focuses on how leaders show up under pressure and shape the environments around them. His book, Essential Leadership, Practicing Love in Turbulent Times, reflects this work and offers a practical path for leading with greater clarity, presence, and impact. Marc, thank you so much for sitting down for this conversation with me. Excuse me.
Thank you for having me on, John. It's great to be with you.
Marc, so great, great bio. Can't wait to dive into the book. When we touch base and I heard about what the book was, its focus, especially in times like today, I couldn't wait to have you on for this conversation. To begin with, just to get a little more of you and what you're up to today, who are you today? What is the work that you're doing? What does your week look like, the day in, day out? Just give us a little more about the work that you're into these days.
Sure. Happy to. Thank you for the question. So, my typical week is deeply immersed with executives, leadership teams in large organizations, typically helping to help them navigate complex challenges, strategic, human, transformational. I'm very hands-on, so I'm not a PowerPoint kind of guy that shows up with a PowerPoint and shows you the way and then says goodbye. I'm really very much immersed in the day-to-day, of the people I work with, and I become very close to them. Many of my clients have become close friends over the years, and I care deeply about the problems they're trying to solve, and I care deeply about them. And so the week could look like, a couple of days on strategy reset. It could look like getting a team to work better together. It could look like a deep conversation with an executive on helping them get through a stressful time or navigate a complex situation. And it could be a mix of all of the above. And of course, I reserve time for writing and reading and reflecting and trying to understand the world around me as well. And of course, very importantly, my family time. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how do you, in light of the work that you do, the leaders you work with, what's your approach to writing? What's your approach to setting time aside for writing? What does that look like? Do you do it based on time, energy, blocks of time? What's your approach to writing as it supplements all your other work in terms of your energy and just your craft?
It's a great question, and I wasn't always a writer. So I'll just preface the response to your question by saying I became a writer when I started writing this book, which goes back about 2.5, 3 years now. I had written before. I'd been fortunate to be published in places like Fortune and Fast Company and other publications, but I never considered myself a writer. In fact, even today, I still struggle to say I'm a writer, although I have improved significantly, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I typically do is, and it's how I manage my week in general, is I have time blocks on my calendar, and I try to keep them sacrosanct. Unless something
Yes.
really, really important or very urgent comes up, I block time, and it's going to be different on different weeks. I know some people like to block early mornings for writing, others late evening. Me, it really depends on what's in front of me. But I will set aside. Certainly, when I was writing my book, it would be 4, 5, 6 hours a week that no one would touch. Sometimes it was late at night, when the house is quiet and there's no phone calls. And today it's typically at the end of the day, 7 or 8 p.m. Well, I'll take an hour to either work on different posts I'm doing or ideas for what I may be working on next. So.
What's incredible about my question I'm about to pose is that I really haven't asked it in a standard fashion, the way that I've asked other questions, but it's come up recently. So what inspires you? What gets you pumped up? I've spoken about flow with other writers. I
Mhm.
guess what is it that motivates you, inspires you to get going? And
Yeah.
then is there anything you do to keep going?
What truly inspires me is the people that I'm surrounded by, my clients, my friends, my family. I genuinely love people. And when I see that I can do something that can help someone in a meaningful way, that's my inspiration. That is truly it. It's always been that way for me. And certainly in my work as a leadership advisor, as a coach, and all that kind of thing, that really gives me my fuel. And when I see at the end of a conversation of a meeting, the person in front of me is feeling lighter, they're smiling more, they've got an opportunity for us to solve a problem they didn't have before. That's my fuel right there. And that's what keeps me going as well. I truly believe that each of us, you, myself, and everyone listening to this podcast, all of us have unique gifts. Unique. You can do a whole bunch of stuff I'm probably terrible at. And everyone I meet has gifts I don't have, and I have gifts other people don't have. So we when we find our gift and we can bring that in service of others, I think that's the most beautiful way to live. Certainly, it's the way I try to live and work. I don't always succeed, but I do my best. But that is really what's at the core of what I do and how I do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. As we get the conversations going with my guests, I listen to the language they use, keywords that pop up, tones that they use, responses they give. So I'm curious, just because I've heard certain things along, even in these 5 minutes, things that you've said that stand out, where I'm kind of like, all right, where did that come from? Why does he think that way? What is it about people? What kind of experience did he have? So getting to the next standard question that I ask, what was the path to today? And I usually like to start around the time where someone went into higher education or into the workforce, whatever their story is. What was that story from then to now?
So professionally speaking, and I could take two tracks here, but I think if I keep it strictly on the professional level, it is interwoven with personal, and I can get to that maybe a little later. But professionally speaking, I had a pretty classic training. I studied business undergraduate, and I had a master's degree on industrial relations, and I was always interested in both business and the human side, and that was sort of my education and my background. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and that's all I've ever done. So for decades now, I've run my own companies. They've been different types of companies. I've had import-export companies. I've had uh, headhunting and recruiting companies. I've had advisory consulting companies. And over the years, I've had tremendous successes and tremendous failures. Obviously, like many of us, we learn a lot more from our failures than our successes. It's the
Yeah.
school of hard knocks, and I've had my share of those. But ultimately, what I realized years ago, 25 years ago, when I started doing this work, which is leadership advisory work, is that at the heart of every successful organization is people, and behind every successful group of people is a great leader. And so this passion sort of emerged to help me, to take me down a path of understanding what is it that makes a great leader? What is it that makes someone take in a way that helps others to perform and to sustain performance and be the best of themselves? And so the path I took was one where I've been a continuous student. I've been learning nonstop. I've been a teacher as well because I've taught and coached thousands of leaders and managers over the years. But the core of my path is learning, and to never stop learning and discovering what makes us tick as humans, what makes me tick, and what helps other people to be the best versions of themselves. So that's a short answer. I can dive into any part of that more if it helps.
Yeah, Mark, I was going to ask, could you give kind of a breakdown of the major points? Just some quick insights into after college, I went into this
Yeah,
field, and then what
sure.
was it that made you pivot to another area? Just because
Yeah,
I'm always curious about the progression of someone's career and their
yeah,
thinking about how they move into that next stage.
gotcha. Absolutely. So my professional path started in Europe, which is where I grew up. I grew up in France, and I went to undergrad in France for business school, and then I did my master's degree in England. And right after college, or right after graduate school, I had the opportunity to go to work for big consulting firms. I interviewed with firms like McKinsey and Bain, and in their London offices, and they were tremendous, tremendous firms. They still are tremendous firms. But I also had the opportunity to join some people in an entrepreneurial venture, which at the time was, this was back in the late 80s. It was an opportunity to start doing wholesale import export of computer supplies. In those days, it was diskettes and printer ribbons. Some people listening to this may not even know what that is because that goes back a long way.
I could actually picture opening up the printer and seeing the ribbon. That's
Yes,
how, yeah, I'm
yes,
with you, my
yes.
friend.
And floppy disks, which were, it's another era. It's like it really is.
Yeah.
Um, so we did that. We started that company. It was successful. I was in my 20s, and wound up managing people that were twice my age, which was a challenge in the sense that, how does a young person who has no experience in managing or leading do that in an effective way? And I would say I wasn't very good at it back then. But nevertheless, our company succeeded. Ran that company for a few years with my partners and eventually sold it. This was all based back in France. I then had the opportunity to get into consulting, which was my first exposure to consulting. And back in those days, it was a specialized financial consulting. We were helping companies also in France and then more broadly in Europe get export credits, get tax credits. It was a great gig, I would say, because you were paid on what you help companies save. So it was easy to sell, especially when you're good at your job. And that company became also very, very successful almost overnight. And I did that for a few years, and then had the opportunity to move to the United States. And I jumped on that opportunity. It was always a dream of mine to live in the U.S. And I was fortunate to be able to come over here. What's interesting for me is what happened when I got here from a professional standpoint. I was in my early 30s, and up until that time, as I just mentioned, everything I've done was very successful. But when I got here, I some things took a turn, I would say, for the worse. It was definitely harder for me, but it was a time of learning for me. So I started several ventures in the U.S. One was an investment venture. There were other ventures I did, retail ventures, and all of them in those first years, they all pretty much failed. And that was when I really started, when I really was able to dive deep into, start to learn about the human condition. Who are we? What drives us? What ultimately is important as a human being to live a fulfilling and successful life? Because my identity was completely wrapped up in my success up until that point. And when
Yeah.
that is stripped away from you, I mean, when you go from being in your mind a young guy, very successful with a lot of money, and suddenly you have everything starts to fail, and you lose that identity. You have to ask yourself, well, who am I? If my money is wrapped up in my professional success, what's the title on my business card, what's in my bank account, and that is none of that is there anymore, then you have to ask yourself, well, who am I really? And that's when I started diving into the world of personal development, leadership, and life took me there and I would say a very painful way. Obviously, today I'm very grateful for that experience because it allowed me to develop so much of what I'm able to transmit today. But at the time was difficult. So this was my early 30s. I then was, I was in a mode of, I would say, fight or flight. We have two systems that run us, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight. It's the survival instinct. And
Hmm.
it's good, but it's not going to get you very
Yeah.
far for very long.
Yeah.
You need it to jump in at times in your life. But I was operating on that operating system. And I needed to get to a deeper place in myself to gather the resources I needed to start over. And I did start over. I created a headhunting organization, recruiting organization. This was back in the early 2000s, specialized in IT recruitment, and that also became quite successful quite quickly. And then we hit a major economic recession, dot-com bubble, etc. And overnight, my clients all disappeared. They either went out of business themselves,
Yeah.
or they didn't have money to recruit people anymore. And so my business model was gone overnight. And so again, I found myself at square one, and I had to start again. So I really I sat down. I had to really think about what do I want to do with my life, because clearly success is never guaranteed, right? So what can I do that resonates with what I'm most passionate about? Because at least if I don't succeed, I'll be doing something I love. And that's when I created my company Indigo with a partner, and we built this company from the ground up. This goes back several decades now, and became a successful executive advisory consulting, ultimately also a technology firm. And it was that's been largely a story of success. But even in that success, there have been ups and downs. There have been bumps in the road. There have been economic recessions. There was COVID, And so what I found in this long journey is, the road is never straight. It's never smooth. So what is most important on that road? It's who we are and who we become. Because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, at the end of our life, if we're lucky enough to live to be 100 years old, we're not going to look back and smile at how much we have in our bank account or what's on our resume. It's who we've become as human beings, the depth we've been able to create inside of us to discover our values, to discover what we're really here for, on this earth, and how we're here to contribute to others. So I would say that is sort of the thread that sort of traverses the last 25 years, which is it's the art of becoming more of you, who you can be every day in service of others. Hopefully that aligns as well with your own professional success, because we do need to live. We need to feed our families, and we have a life to live. But the two go together, and it can't be one, in my opinion, one without the other, right?
Mark, for you, then obviously you have business difficulties or your businesses go under, and then you have this realization. I guess I'm just curious where it originates, that understanding of there's humility there. But was there a moment, was there somebody who was around you that kind of changed your thinking about that insight of making sure that you're doing the right thing, or doing something you're passionate about, that it's not all about success? Again, when something like that happens, it does wake you up. There is humility. You're knocked down a couple pegs, right? Or all
Yes,
the pegs, whatever it may be. But your own insight and curiosity then about, okay, who am I as a human, and all those pieces that go along with that thought. Was there somebody around you that kind of pointed that out? Where did you gain that kind of insight? What was the trigger
sure.
for you to understand that side of things?
That's such a great question, John. That insight, the beginning of that insight, actually happened in my childhood. I was a young child, and at the age of 5, my father called me to have a conversation with him. It was a serious conversation. I didn't. It was unexpected, and he felt this was the right time to share his own childhood story. My dad was born in Poland, and he was Jewish, and he lived in Poland during the Holocaust. It turns out that he lived in the most brutal of circumstances, and somehow, miraculously, he survived. And in the way you would talk to a child, he started to relate to me some of his history, some of my family's history, the story of the destruction of a very, very large family, hundreds of members, and of course, 3 million other Polish Jews at the time. And of course, it took me time to even begin to understand and integrate that over the years. And what struck me most as I grew up and as I went from childhood to adolescence is reconciling sort of the horrific story that he lived through and who he was. He was an incredibly positive, loving, generous, open human being, always ready to crack a joke, always ready to lift other people up. He was so positive. I never saw him down, ever. Even in very tough circumstances. He went through some health challenges and things like that later in his life. And when I was old enough to comprehend and to even understand that I was having trouble reconciling this paradox, I just asked him, how did you live through what you lived through with that tremendous pain and loss and become the person you are? Positive, generous, always there for others, optimistic. He said, it's just a choice. It's just a choice. That stayed with me my entire life.
You were able to ask him that specific question?
I
That's
was
a
able to ask
blessing
him.
that you're able to
Yeah.
recognize the heaviness of his experience and and still have him around to ask him that question.
Yeah. I asked him that question as a teenager.
Wow.
And I didn't fully comprehend, wasn't able to internalize the depth of his response until I was older. And so when I was facing in my early 30s, facing these financial and business challenges that I mentioned to you, John, that came back. That came back to me. He was still around, thank God, in those days. He was still alive, and he was still there for me as a role model. Um, I signed up at that point for some leadership personal development classes, and I remember being in one of these classrooms with about 300 other people, and the instructor, very, very good instructor, who was kind of taking us through these mental machinations to help us sort of get rid of the layers that were holding us back. And I remember there was a point in time where this person helped us see that we are not our circumstances, and that connected me right back to what my father had taught me through his own life and through his own advice. It's not a mental or intellectual understanding alone. It's a visceral feeling. There's a set of circumstances here which are deeply challenging to me, and yet I know I'm who I am is beyond those circumstances. And when that happened, it happened in an instant. I wasn't even ready for it. I didn't make it happen. It happened through the process I was going through. I saw in my mind a whole road open up ahead of me, like this path of possibility. I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but I felt it so deeply, and that reignited me after this series of failures, and that's when I was able to find that inner fuel to take off on that next chapter of my life, professionally at least.
So at that moment, was the next chapter building up the HR company, or was it after that?
That was the very
Okay.
next chapter. Yeah, not so much HR, but it was leadership in the broader sense, which included strategy. It
Yeah.
included personal coaching and transformation. Yes, that was the next chapter, and that was 25 or so years ago, 26 maybe at
So
this.
so what was your thinking? I know kind of the background of your father, his story, its impact on you, what it made you learn about yourself.
Yeah,
What's your conversation with yourself about, okay, this is the field that I want to go into?
yeah,
If you can invite me into your mind, what was
yeah, yeah,
you realize, okay, I've been through a lot. My father shared this lesson. Okay, I got to continue. Okay, I have to make it count, whatever it may be. So, what's that thinking? And okay, I'm going to go into the leadership practice, the leadership field, and discipline.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. It's a great question. Um, I I realized through my own experiences and through everything I was learning from people I knew, from all the reading I was doing, but also from a lot of the people that I was just knew socially, that people were struggling to take ideas and put them into practice. And when I started to delve into the literature around this and the research, I realized that, you know, organizations are full of very smart people, talented people, uh, often very competent in their trades, technically, strategically. But when you bring people together around an idea, it becomes very hard. And the hard part of it is not necessarily the strategy. Strategy is hard for sure, but it's the human element that it takes to go from the inception of idea to the execution of idea as a group. It's hard alone, but it's even harder as a team. As a team, you want everyone to bring the best of themselves into the equation. You want them to work well together, to collaborate, to have sort of a level of harmony. But that is very, very hard to find. And the reason it's hard to find is because everyone's coming to that conversation with their own stuff, their own baggage, their own limitations, which they don't even know are there. And I'm not talking about limitations as a bad thing. It's just, it's the voice in our minds that holds us back, that tells us some sort of truth about ourselves, truth about others, which is often all wrong. And so our focus in the early years of our organization was how do we help leadership teams align, get beyond that stuff, get to the human part of it so that, yes, we help them create strategy and we help them execute, but they've got to first understand what the human dynamics are, first of all, within themselves, what's happening in you at any point in time. What are your thoughts? What are your emotions? What's going on for you that's either helping you or holding you back? And then what's happening across the team? And that was really that realization that crystallized that point in time is that we that was became our focus.
So then, I'm always curious for each of my guests, how do you tie that into your childhood? Not that you knew you were going to build up necessarily to this, but how do you reconcile who you were as a child to who you are today and the work that you're doing today? What comes through?
It's a good question. I mean, I think it goes back again to the story of my dad and my family's history. When it's something that's in your DNA that you've experienced viscerally through your parents' story and through your family's story, and you see what can happen in this world, tremendous amount of pain, tremendous amount of destruction, of how human beings can be wonderful but also terrible. I think that sort of set the narrative for me, which is, well, this world's got amazing potential, people have amazing potential, but they also go down a terrible path. How do I be part of the equation, part of the solution, no matter what I do, that helps raise people to a better level of themselves and for a better world? And I think that sort of it comes from pain, I would say. It comes even from trauma. I think we have something called generational trauma. We inherit that from our parents or from our ancestors. For me, it was so alive, it was so strong that it almost compelled me to do something which would help people. Now, I could have become a doctor. That was another option. I did think about it at some point in my life. Do I want to go into the healing arts, something like
Yeah.
that? But I was pulled towards the business world, and I think I still practice the same concept, which is helping people and organizations become more whole. But it's applied to the business world versus what a doctor or a person in the medical field would do. So
Yeah. I like that, drawing that parallel between those areas, this healing bridge, that it exists. It's needed in both sides,
yes,
both the physiological as well as the business side. Especially, I mean, these days, it seems like there was always a need for it, but now that people are so interconnected with technology, we don't want to lose sight of that humanity. So I appreciate that, Mark. Mark, what do you consider your superpower? Out of everything I've heard, what's the thing that stands out that people go to you for, you feel most comfortable in, that nobody can take away from who you are?
I don't know that I would call it a superpower because I feel like I'm an eternal student and I'm continually improving myself. But I think what I'm best at is helping individual leaders and groups of leaders to navigate complexity. And that's by helping them understand what is happening beyond what they may see or know inside of them, in the world around them, and then finding the resources to navigate that with equanimity and with as much tranquility and peace of mind as possible, because the world is so complex and so hard today. Even compared to when I started this work 25 years ago, we're in a different dimension of complexity and difficulty, I would say, and challenge and opportunity, all up in one.
Aside from the business, building various businesses so you know things inside and out, aside from the human capacity, curiosity that you have, um, so aside from the business stuff, aside from the heart stuff, um, did you have a deep curiosity? Did you always carry that? Whether it was, obviously we see it in business, obviously we see it
Yeah.
in humanity. How do you speak to that curiosity? I mean, if it goes back to the story of your family, obviously that makes sense. But I asked just to see if you wanted to put any other words to
Yeah.
specifically your curiosity, because I think so much of what you've done is based in curiosity as well.
It really is. And it's very insightful of you. I don't know where it comes from, but I'm endlessly curious. I love to learn about people. I love to learn about the world. I love to learn about cultures. I love to learn about things that have nothing to do with my background in the business world. And I'll read scientific publications. I'll try to read history and all of that actually plays a role, I think, in helping us become more complete human beings. But the curiosity was always there, and I think it's because I had the opportunity growing up to live in different cultures. I was fortunate that with my father's profession, I lived for a few years in Italy. I grew up in France. I lived then as a student in England, and now I live in the U.S. And I my curiosity, I think, stems most of all from just looking at the people in the world around me and seeing the incredible richness of diversity that exists in this world, and trying to understand as much as I can. I still feel I understand very, very close to nothing because it's such a massive, massive world out there. But
I mean, just in watching the World Cup,
yeah,
seeing all these different fans come from all over the
yeah,
world. You
yeah,
know they're out there, but what's incredible with something like the World Cup is when you see them all together, you're like, oh, those differences are real.
yes,
You know what I mean?
yes.
When you see like the Norwegians
Yeah,
rowing next to the Mexicans and the South Koreans, it's incredible to see this picture of all these cultures just clash in such a positive way.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It is. I actually love the World Cup. It's my favorite sporting event. I love the
Oh, I
Olympics too, but the World
I
Cup
bet
is my number one for sure.
I've been so unproductive the last couple of weeks. It's ridiculous. So I guess that prompts another question from me, Mark, is
Yeah,
can you go through the societies, the cultures that you lived in and tell me what you believe you um not that this is the only thing you took away, but what do you think you took away from being French, living in France, England, a couple other areas you spoke to?
yeah.
What do you think, if you could just very quickly, what did you take away from each of them?
Oh, that is a great question, and no one's ever asked me that question, John. So let me think about it for a sec. And
It's what I try to do, Mark.
yeah, yeah, you're doing
I tr-
well. Appreciate it. Um, so my childhood, my early childhood, I was born. So just to add to the picture, the tapestry,
sure.
I was born in Africa, in South Africa. So I had early childhood there.
Really?
Yeah,
My
yeah,
God. Okay.
yeah. So it's s- so my early childhood was in South Africa. My dad having was a refugee, and that was one of the countries that was taking in refugees back when he was, a teenager, young adult. Um, it was a beautiful country back then, but when we lived there, apartheid was still a real thing. And for that reason, my dad did not want to stay there, and so we wound up leaving. So I've been back since. It's a gorgeous country, and I think Africa in general has just this tremendous power and feel this pulsation of life. I think that's what I take from that. And I don't know all of Africa, but I've traveled to a few countries, both in Southern Africa, Northern Africa. There's something powerful there, very real. And I think all of us have some ancestry that goes
Yeah.
back there,
Yeah.
the original humans. So it is something very visceral. But I didn't live there for long enough to be able to answer your question fully. Um, Italy, I think, is there's an expression in Italian called dolce vita, which means the sweet life. It's a country
Yeah.
where people love life. They love food. They love beauty. They love beautiful cars. I think there's a lot of that there, and I think beauty is an important part of life, and in crafting beautiful, beautiful objects and beautiful cars, beautiful clothes, and beautiful food. And I lived there as a child for a few years, but those are my main. I'd say my main memories from Italy. France, I spent a lot longer. I went to high school there. I went to college there. Incredible country, incredible culture, deep, rich, amazing. I think what most impresses me about the French people is the intellect. There's just endless numbers of philosophers and thinkers and great mathematicians and great engineers. It's a country of tremendous, tremendous intellect and the word Cartesian, which means rational, comes from René Descartes, who was a great French
Hmm.
philosopher. It's rational thinking, and the French are phenomenal at doing what they call thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. You look at both sides of the equation and then you bring it together in the middle. And that's a big part, I
Yeah.
think, of
Yeah.
of of what brings the richness of France to the world is that intellect. But of course, France is also a country of beauty and art. I think all of that is very important. To have full lives is to have all sorts of these pieces of ourselves that come together. Whether it's the work you do, but it's also appreciating the beauty and the art and the history and the philosophy of a place. So that's a big part, I think, of France. There's a lot more there. And then the US, I think it's a dream of a lot of people that don't grow up here to come and live in the US, and we all have that. idea of what is the American dream. And certainly, I think for me, the spirit in this country is absolutely extraordinary. It is extraordinary. There's something in the spirit of the American people which I don't know if it exists anywhere else. It's that this country's got, more entrepreneurs per square meter than anywhere else.
Yeah.
And it's because this is the country of possibility, of pioneers, of we can do things that people believe is impossible. And I think, to me, that's the heart of what's here, of course, in this amazing constitution that we have. So in a
I love
nutshell.
that. Thank you so much. I mean, yeah, being in the thick of the World Cup, I love hearing obviously great things said about the US, but I also appreciate all the beauty from the other areas of the country or the other areas of the world that you lived in. So I appreciate that breakdown that you provided, Mark. Mark, before we get to your book, last question. What does leadership mean to you? So we've spoken about leadership, your work, what you see in it, but asking you directly, how do you define leadership? What does great leadership look like?
Mm. To me, and this really, the way I'm about to define it really comes from my personal experience of what I've seen and what has been meaningful to me. To me, it's the ability to bring a group of people together around a meaningful purpose and to help them be excellent in the pursuit of that purpose and to help them become the best version of themselves as they're doing all of that. So it's that alignment of we're coming together, we're doing something that's going to be great and it's going to be meaningful and it's going to make the world better. And in that process, I'm going to become the best version of myself. So it's all of those elements together.
Yeah. I love anytime somebody answering that question involves that component of, in essence, making something better, leaving something better than they found it, ensuring that you're not just utilizing people to get to an end, but that you're really building them for themselves as well. So I appreciate
Yes.
that. Mark, why don't we jump into the book? If you want, just give the title of the book one more time, just so people don't lose sight of it. And
Sure.
then where in the path of the leadership work did this start coming
Yeah.
into your vision to write a book?
Thanks, John. So the book it's called Essential Leadership. I'm practicing love, L-O-V-E in turbulent times. And the love, the four letters, they're an acronym. They stand for the four pillars that I talk about in the book. Um, the the book has been germinating in my mind for a number of years, probably 7 or 8 years, but I only started writing it about 2.5, 3 years ago. The reason I decided to sit down and write it, and it did take, we talked earlier about the blocks of writing when we sit down to write and how that happens. And I needed to create that discipline because I was really, really busy, but I didn't want to wait anymore. I did not want to wait to get these ideas down because I believe they're helpful to people and they're specifically helpful to leaders. Um, I just saw that post COVID, um, things were difficult, more difficult, I think, than they've ever been. We all sort of rallied during COVID. We had this adrenaline rush to see how we could cope with this craziness that was happening, working from home and, connecting in different ways and finding solutions. We made it through with some scars, I would say.
Yeah, yeah,
This was hard for the world and everywhere it was hard. But I think when we landed on the other side of that, we were all different. Something, things shifted. And we landed in a place where so the adrenaline effect had worn off. And we're in a world that's extremely complex, extremely difficult, whether it's geopolitically, economically, socially. Of course, we've got tremendous complexity in the technological world with everything coming out in AI and everything. All these make for a complex picture to live in and to lead
yeah,
in. And I really felt that I had some ideas which I'd seen were very helpful to the people I've worked with over the last quarter century, that if I could condense them and distill them into some understandable and relatable themes, that the book would be able to help people. And so I said to myself, this is back, 2023, 2023, I need to get this book out because I want to condense a lot of what I've seen help people and make it accessible, in an inexpensive book so people can read it and hopefully get something from it.
So to that end, Mark, how did you decide to structure the book? What's that path that you take the reader on? How did you decide to lay it out in the fashion that in which it was published?
Well, I will say it wasn't easy in the sense that I reworked that. so many times. It certainly wasn't a straight and direct line. Like I know exactly what it
Yeah.
needs to look like. I can't tell you, John, how many times I rewrote the paragraphs, reordered the paragraphs, refined. I went back again and again and again and again with the help of my editors. I had some phenomenal people giving me feedback and coaching me, and like this is like twice too long. You can say the same idea in half the amount of words, or maybe
Yeah.
maybe this chapter's in the wrong place, or maybe. And I kept on going back and back. And thanks to the publishers at Manuscripts Press who published this book for me, they were phenomenal. So the ultimately my goal is to take the reader on a journey. So the layout as it is today takes them really from my childhood story, which I shared with you a little while ago, and how that became the inception of so much in my life, through to then my my own understanding of the world as we see it today in leadership, which is very complex. We live in this world which, we used to use this term VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. It's a military term which became adopted in the business world. And today we talk about a different acronym, which is BANI, B-A-N-I, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and irrational. And it's because we've literally taken a quantum leap into a high level of complexity, which very few of us, I don't think actually any of us can fully comprehend the reality we live in today. It takes a lot of us to think and together and try and iron it out, but it changes so fast that when you think you've understood something, it's already different.
Yeah.
So I try to lay out that and what the impact is. And John, what I've seen in the organizations I work with is tremendous people. I mean, talented leaders, phenomenal at their jobs, highly competent, but burning out. Just, and oftentimes without even realizing it until it's too late, until God forbid something happens, either they wind up in the hospital or they have some kind of tremendous anxiety that comes upon that they can't manage, and it's far more widespread than we realize. It's probably the statistics show that at about 50% of the people in workforce today are hit by burnout anxiety, but it's probably even higher than that because reported statistics are typically lower than what the
Underreported. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's a shame. I was thinking about that as you were talking about the reporting on what's out there. It's like, and most people don't know because everybody's trying to put up such a strong facade of I
Yes.
can handle this.
Yes.
If I demonstrate that I'm wavering in any way, it reflects poorly on me. So I don't know, for whatever reason, when you were talking about the reporting, I was curious. I'm like, I can only imagine how much not underreporting, but just people not saying anything, just sucking it up, just because they see that as a badge of honor that I can go through the crucible and make it out the other side, hopefully.
That's so well put. That is really well put. And not knowing what that looks like, feels like, how to make it through the crucible is very, very hard. And there's just tremendous amount of suffering and stress out there in our corporate world today. And it doesn't have to be that way. It does not have to be that way. I think many of us assume that, yeah, this is just the way it is. It's hard. We've got to grind our teeth and grit and make it through.
Yeah.
But no, it doesn't have to be that way.
That's the other piece I was going to say is that some people they think burnout is when you collapse, which obviously it is. If you faint, yes, burnout. But
Yeah.
I think they feel like that's the only image or only final definition of burnout is when you've absolutely burnt out. But they don't really think about the burning out process, like what that path looks like. So I like that we can bring up that there's more to it than just crashing and burning, that there's a lead up that you have to pay attention to and look out for.
Yes, yes. And you have to know how to look out for it, as you say, because
Yeah.
so many of the leaders and managers in our organizations are type A's, and I'm a type A, right? So I can relate to that. You might be as well. We want to get stuff done. We want to hit our outcomes and our results, but you pay a price for that. And so as a recovering type A, I will say I've had to learn what it takes to self-manage, and I've done that now for decades, and it's part of what I also transmit to my clients.
For you, Mark, looking back, you've told me about the successful companies you had, the ups and downs. In learning about this work at this point in your career, well, the last 25 years, how do you look back at your own points of burnout, or were you able to look back and say, "Oh, I didn't know it then, but that was burnout"?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, that's exactly right. I've had those points, and I did not know that I didn't have the words or the education or the understanding to point them out.
Yeah,
And I think I would say, I know it's a bit of a generality what I'm going to say. It happens, I think, more probably to men than women, just because where our wiring is such that we're less in tune with our emotions.
yeah,
Now, it's not completely true. There are men that are very in tune with their emotions and
of
women that are less
course.
in tune. But broadly speaking, that's what I've seen, and that's
Yeah,
why I feel like female leaders have a lot to bring to the world because they have that component more developed than we do typically. Um, so yeah, I've had many of those sort of points on the journey where I've I've been burnt out without realizing it, but you realize it when you're having trouble getting up in the morning and having a productive day, or you're doing your work, but you've got brain fog and you can't think clearly. I've experienced all of that. And there was a point in time where I need to learn how to manage and master this stuff so I can be effective and happy in my life. And I talk a lot about this in the book actually. And so that's really brings us to the love framework, which is
yes,
about
please share.
how we access that piece of ourselves and how we help bring it into our organizations as well.
Can you speak a little to each of the letters in the acronym and what it stands for, and maybe how you came to discover it and
Yes,
kind of come upon it?
absolutely. Appreciate that question. So I'll tell you briefly what the acronym stands for, and then I'll go into each one separately. So the L stands for letting go. That's the L of love, letting go. The O stands for oneness, the V for vision, and the E for energy. And I can do a little high level on each one, and then happy to
Sure,
dive
that'd
in
be great. That'd be
more
great.
depth. You can guide me how far you want to go in each one. But letting go, basically, it sounds, first of all, it doesn't sound like much when you just hear, what does it mean, letting go? Letting go of what and why? What I explain in the book is that most of us live in what I call the illusion of control. We believe that when we get up in the morning, our job is to control the world and people around us so we can be or achieve X,
Yeah,
Y, Z,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Right. And almost all of us function in that paradigm without even realizing it. We believe that happiness is at the other end of some sort of achievement. And to get to that achievement, we have to control the people and events in our lives so we can get to that achievement. That whole construct is a complete illusion for many reasons. First of all, um, control control is actually impossible. We cannot control the world around us.
yeah.
Forget about we even the people around us, and even think about the people in our own families. Even as a parent, control. You don't struggle. You learn humility as a parent, right? I mean,
Yeah.
control is an illusion. It is an illusion, and especially we believe we can control the world to get to the outcomes we want.
I mean, right away, what comes to mind is what your father went through,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, um,
Yeah.
and reading Viktor Frankl's book,
Yes.
Man's Search for Meaning, that kind of,
Yeah.
it's like that
Yeah.
fight to control, like you can only do so much. And the realization of that is the real power.
Exactly. We have much less control than we think, much less. And
Yeah.
we can let go of this, I'd say often subconscious, but powerful desire to control what happens in our life. We free ourselves because the more we try to control, it's like squeezing life. Life doesn't work by squeezing. It works, it's a flow. It's like if you watch a surfer, that surfer is not trying to control the wave. You cannot control the wave, but you can surf the wave and you can do beautiful things on that way to the beach, right?
Next time I have this conversation with my kids about not getting frustrated because there's only so much you can do,
Yeah,
that you just have to keep trying different things.
yeah,
That's a great visual of the
yeah,
surfer, where the surfer can't control where the wave is going, how big
right,
the wave is
right,
getting, where it's,
right.
none of that. They can just kind of decide, okay, I can do this. I can go through the tunnel.
Yes,
I can,
yes,
I have to work with what's there, this energy that's coming at me and
yes,
enveloping me.
yes, exactly. Life is one giant wave,
Yeah.
and there's so much happening at any given time. We have control over nothing, nothing, right?
Yeah.
Barely control ourselves if we kind of try to think of it. But we can learn to surf the waves. And you just put it so well, John, that energy that's coming our way. we can learn to harness it and go with it
Yeah.
rather than to control something that's impossible, right? So what I talk about in the book is this idea which the psychiatrist Carl Jung talked about, which is what you resist persists. What you resist persists. The more you're resisting reality, the more you're using your force, your energy to try and stop something which already exists. So
Yeah.
how do we turn that around and flow with that wave to navigate it and try and create better outcomes for ourselves and others? It's a completely different mindset. And we grow up with this idea that by controlling, we get to outcomes that are going to make us happy, but it never happens. You think about it, right? As a kid, you can't wait to get to high school because you're going to be one of the big kids and you're going to be more important and you're going to be happy when you're in high school. When you're in high school, well, you have to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend to be able to look cool and to be part of the good of the right crowd, and then you'll be happy. Well, that doesn't really happen that way. When you're in high
Yeah.
school, you wait for college. Do you think it brings freedom?
Yeah.
And when you're in college, you can't wait to get your first job because you want to make money. And then you think about marriage, and all these are what's next for me, so I can be whatever I think in my mind I need to become for happiness. But those are all external events, and they never actually bring us the happiness we want. So we're using control to chase a dream. It's like the donkey in front of the carrot in front of the donkey. It's always a step ahead, and that keeps
Yeah.
us in a perpetual state of fight or flight, of survival, and of unhappiness. And so that illusion of control, that's the L of letting go. There's a lot more in the book about that, but in a nutshell,
Okay.
we can let go of that mistaken assumption that we need to control, and we can start flow with the wave. Life is completely different, and
Yeah,
leadership would be
that was
different.
a great amount of information for that first letter. I think that's the perfect amount to really tease people with a great idea and then let them get the book so they can dive in deeper. So the next one is oneness,
The
Mark?
next one is oneness. So it also stems from an illusion, and the illusion, and it's not. I'm not criticizing ourselves for having this illusion. It's the world we're born into, John. It's the way life is set up. We're born and we get into this world, and whatever we live through, and all of us have some sort of challenges in our family, in our lives, which usually we experience in childhood, and we get this belief, I need to survive. And we believe at some level, depending on what our parents taught us or the culture we're in, that we're in it alone, where there's an isolated fragment, this isolated human being in a hostile world, and we have to fight to survive. When in fact, if we look at what the science teaches us about the way the world works, biology, ecology, everything that works well works in systems. Forests have these intelligent networks where trees work together to ensure their well-being and survival. Our natural ecosystem, every animal has a place in the ecosystem. It all works in a harmony. And human beings are no different. We are wired to cooperate, even though our history is full of war and conflict and domination. And I need to be stronger than you, or I need to beat you, or whatever. I
Yeah.
believe that's all wrong. And I believe, based on not just my ideas, but there's a tremendous amount of research out there that shows us that we're actually wired for cooperation, and that we're healthier and happier when we are cooperating, when we're working as a network of people that are deeply interconnected. And so that oneness is a very, very real thing.
Yeah.
Even at the psychological level, John, we have this part of our brain called the limbic system. The limbic system is an open loop. What that means is how I feel. If I enter a meeting and I'm in a bad mood, it's going to be contagious. I'm going to pull you down with me. But if I'm in a good mood, I'm going to lift you up. And if I'm the leader, that becomes even more important. So we live in an interconnected psychological world. And now science is showing us we even live in an interconnected electromagnetic world. And without getting into too much science here, our hearts give off electromagnetic signals, and we can pick them up from one another. So even before
Incredible.
speaking, yeah, even before speaking, we're feeling what's happening with the other person at a very subtle level. It influences us,
Yeah.
right? So that oneness is critical because a leader plays a more important role in a system. That leader's very presence is going to impact the people around him or her before
Hmm.
they open their mouth. You
Yeah.
walk into a room and you're picking up something. Am I feeling
Absolutely.
fear? Am I feeling danger? Am I feeling safe? Am I feeling connected? Am I feeling trust? All this happens in an instant
Yeah.
at a subliminal level, but it's very real, and the research out there shows this today. right? And so understanding that we are one and that who I am before I even open my mouth, before I even take an action, is going to impact the people I work with is a profound act of leadership. So how do you show up? Who you are, who you are before you open your mouth to take an action is actually essentially important. That's part of the essential I talk about leadership, right? That what essence are you bringing with you as you're interacting with the people you work with? So that's the O for oneness. Again, there's a lot behind that,
Yep.
that at a high level that kind of captures it.
Okay.
Uh, the V is for vision. We use the word vision a lot in organizations, and I think it's good that we do because we need to know where we're going. But knowing where we're going is not enough. Like if we say, okay, well, our goal is $1 billion in revenue, that's great. But is that number a meaningful, inspirational outcome to get all your people behind you?
Yeah.
It's not. You have to have purpose in that vision. You have to understand why it's important to your customers, to the world, and what your place is in that. And so the vision has to be clear, inspirational, and conscious. And oftentimes, the vision that we're living into, especially in organizations, is not the most beautiful vision. It's not the most inspiring or the most meaningful, and we don't understand the impact that has on us, which is very, very profound. And so, being able to craft a powerful vision, which is meaningful and conscious and embodied. And what I mean by that is that when you craft a vision, it's not just about the future. That should impact who you are today and the future you're living into. So it's got to change who you are today. And so that vision is critically important. And finally, the E is for energy. Energy is essential. We eat for energy, we drink for energy, we sleep for energy. We work out, we do all these things to make sure we have enough energy to make it through the day. And that is an important physiological component of energy. But the energy I'm talking about is a little different. It's psychological, psychic, spiritual, whatever you want to call it. It's the energy we bring to each other.
Mm-hmm.
As a leader, again, who you are when you walk into a room is going to either lift people up or bring them down. So the question is, how do you become a positively energizing leader? Because that energy is the fuel that we run on in our organizations, right? We know we talked about earlier, we're dealing with burnout, we're dealing with stress, we're dealing with challenging situations. But as a leader, you have the opportunity to bring a source of fuel to the people around you, which is positive energy. And that is immensely important in helping people to become the best versions of themselves. When people are in positive environments, the research shows us they're smarter. Positive emotions, positive energy makes us smarter. It makes our brain function better. In fact, there's research that shows that there's a connection between the heart and the brain in each of us. And the more coherent our heart is, the better our brain is going to work, the better ideas we're going to have, the more resilient we're going to be. And so I talk about a concept in the book, which is the leadership heart set. So we talk about leadership mindset. I talk
Mm-hmm.
about the heart set because if you want to bring energy, positive energy to people, you can't just come with your mind. You could be the smartest person in the world. You don't bring your heart into that conversation, into that meeting,
Yeah.
into that group. Half of you is missing, and the connection between the heart and the brain is missing. There's a whole lot that's getting wasted, a lot of potential left on the table. So letting go, oneness, vision, energy these are the dimensions of essential leadership that I talk about in the book. And they're applicable personally at your personal level, but they're also applicable at the group level, at the organizational level.
Mark, I'm curious. I've learned about you, your background, where these lessons came from of the heart, of humanity, of stress, of trauma, right? Trauma's come up. How has sharing this format, this philosophy with the world, getting this book out there, how has this evolved the way that you look at things? Has anything changed in you? Not so much in the technical side of putting the book together, but just getting it out there and really putting all your ideas together. What's changed in you in how you view the material, how you view the philosophy?
Such a great question. Um, well, I think first of all, when I decided to write the book, I had to make a decision to put myself more out there in the world. I'm a private person. I typically, and although like I've said, I've written and I've been teaching and I've been lecturing for many years. This book is very personal, And there's a little bit of vulnerability in putting this stuff out there because you're really sharing your not just your you're sharing your heart, you're sharing your soul. And I had to think, is it worth it? And I had to make that decision. To me, it is, because there's just a lot of need out there. And so that's the first piece I would say, John, is that conscious choice to just be very authentic and very vulnerable in the world by putting out what I believe,
Yeah.
and by being very, very, very personal about it. The second thing is writing the book and putting it into form challenges me as well to live the concepts that I propose, because it's not easy, right? It's not because I've written this book and that I understand these ideas that I'm going to practice them perfectly every day. I
We're
fail
all
all
works
the
in
time myself.
progress.
We're all works in progress, and
Yeah.
but I I challenge myself to be the best version of myself every day, and I see, because I have this paradigm that I've written in front of me, I can see very clearly where I'm succeeding, where I'm failing, and I fail a lot, honestly, I do. But the goal is to keep progressing. It's to keep growing every day, and if we can see that we're progressing, that's also fuel. It's also positive. That's energy for our lives and for our work.
Mark, not to rush you to your next project, but where do you see your writing going for a next book, if at all? Where do you think you want to head? You don't have to give away the story, just a general
No.
idea.
Um, I I'm toying with taking one of these concepts in the love framework and going a lot deeper into it, because there's so much there, and I honestly don't know which one it is yet.
Yeah.
But there's a lot. There's a whole sort of depth of there's a whole world in each of these that can be extremely valuable. So that's one option I'm thinking about right now, but I honestly don't know yet. Right now, um, I'm still writing about sort of about this concept as it stands in its entirety, and trying to get the word out there, in different manners.
Obviously, we're talking about your book today, Mark. What book stands out to you? What book has really changed the way you look at things? What book really is at the peak of just kind of your ideas that's maybe inspired you or really stood out for you?
There's a ton of great books there, though. If I had to choose one, it would be the one, John, that you mentioned about 10 minutes ago, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's an incredible book, and the reason I love that book, first of all, it's a great book, and I think it should be read by every leader in the world because it's got
Yeah.
such power. Um, but it gave language to what I had learned from my father, because Viktor Frankl himself was a great psychiatrist, one of the greatest in the world at his time. He was also a Holocaust survivor. He came out of that experience and put this book together as a work about a man's search for meaning. And he teaches us, John, fundamentally that there's a space in us between stimulus and response, meaning that between the circumstances or the time something happens and how we choose to come at the world, between those two things, there's a space in us, which is enormous freedom. It's conscious choice. To understand that we have conscious choice is priceless. It's priceless. In his book, it's not easy to read because it's so painful, but it's a thin book, but it has so much depth and power to it. So that's the
Yeah.
one book I would recommend to anyone who's a leader or aspiring leader to understand what they have inside of them as potential.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, just echoing what you said, not easy material, but I think a necessary read for anybody that wants to get a hold on just the trials, the tribulations, the traumas of life, the challenges. Again, it plays back to that control where most of our stress, most of our anxiety, maybe depression in certain cases comes from believing that everything has to have, that
Yeah.
we have to control everything, where that book speaks to, well, what if you do if you're not in control? How
Yes.
much do you surrender if you're not in control?
Yes.
How are you defined by what you can't control? So,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
I laugh just because it's such a simple idea. And obviously, his story is one of the most difficult in history, but
Yeah.
we can't take those lessons for granted. I don't think so. So I appreciate that you echo that sentiment on that book. Mark, in wrapping up, is there anything you want to share that I might not have asked about? Anything at all? Anything you want to put out there to share with this audience? The floor is all yours, my friend.
Thanks. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show and for being such a great interviewer. You ask tremendous questions, and you've got a fantastic quality of listening, which makes it so much easier for whoever's opposite you that kind of
I
really
appreciate
share what's
that.
in their heart and mind. So thank you, first of all, for that.
Thank you so much.
Um, I, I guess my message is really um, that we have a space in us, which I call in the book the space of being, and we can access that space where we're called human beings and not human doings. And burnout is related to mistaking ourselves for human doings, but there's a being there, a being, and I kind of get into that in the book. What does it mean to be? And how can you access that? Because when you access your being, who you are beneath the noise of your thoughts and emotions, you access your true power, your true resources, and probably your true mission and purpose in life as well. And so that's the thought I want to leave people with is you're a human being and not a human doing. There's a pathway, not one, but many pathways to access your being. And if it's something that interests you, I would suggest that you look into it. You can certainly buy my book, but there's many other avenues to get there. But that's what I would want to leave people with on this conversation, at least.
No, that's not going to be what you leave people with because I have one more question. I
Okay.
forgot you had mentioned it, but I got to ask, at what point did you
Yeah.
get into teaching? And I have you just for a couple minutes, I know.
Yeah.
But in terms of your teaching, how did that end up happening? Very briefly, how did that end up happening, and what are some of the courses you teach?
Well, the teaching is mainly to corporate audiences. It's not sort of university teaching. It's
Okay,
mainly to
okay.
leaders and managers, and so it's been part of what I've been offering for a number of years. But it's a lot of the stuff we talk about here. It's also I do also classic strategy and things like that. But I've been doing that for a while now. So
And again, Marc shared his own book, Essential Leadership, Practicing Love, L.O.V.E., the acronym in turbulent times. Marc, thank you so much for your time, everything you shared about your family history, the work you're doing. I appreciate it so much.
well, thanks again, John. It's been really great to be on here with you and to have this conversation. Really appreciate it.
And if there's anything that I might have missed, please let me know. There's so much to cover, a little time, but if there's anything that I can reach out to Marc and get a little bit more on, wisdom, insight, knowledge, any of it, please let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching, listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.